How's it going, Ram fans? I'm Ethan Bird.
And I'm Rachel Hallam.
And we are still in Las Vegas. You could thank the snowstorm for that, but it also helped us because we were able to sit down and watch both the NCAA and NIT selection shows. And CSU didn't make the NCAA tournament, which was a little tough. But they are the number one seed in the NIT, and here's just a little bit about how kind of our selection day went. Let the stress begin.
Meanwhile, who will they play? They will take on 13th seed Ohio Bobcats. Coach Jeff Bowles, captain of the 94 team.
Can we just get to the... Why do we have to have commercials during this? Oh!
Wow.
Utah State?
Wow.
That's a bubble team. Actually, that's the one team that I had out.
Standard for retail moving forward.
Last quadrant. This gotta be Alabama. If it's not Bama, they got screwed.
What?
So that means Bama's the 2 seed? Oh my lord. Michigan over Bama? Oh.
Wow.
Call it CSU. Come on. Give it to us!
This would be so fun.
Give it to us, come on.
No!
Georgetown!
Out of the Big East. Their first Big East tournament
Oh
titles
my
in
God.
2007. Iona, headed up by Rick Pitino, third coach in NCAA history, to take 5 schools to the NCAA tournament. They won.
This is the NIT selection show. I have changed my clothes and put in my contacts to show that time has passed. Can we pick?
Yeah!
Woo! 1 seed, baby! Let's go!
God, that was so much more, less stressful than actually waiting for the whole
Let's
thing.
go!
Let's go!
Buffalo!
Okay. Wow, that was a lot quicker than the last one.
That's the end of the video.
Thank y'all for watching.
Well, after that upsetting instance, we looked at the NIT tournament bracket now, and like he said just a second ago, Colorado State did get the first seed in this tournament. Their first matchup is going to be against Buffalo, who went 16-8 in their regular season. They'll play them this Friday. Now, what's Colorado State looking at this week?
Well, I think that the Rams are going to be hungry because they not only did they have that very disappointing output against Utah State, but also they were still expecting to get into the NCAA tournament. And their second alternate, which probably isn't going to happen, we'll know by tomorrow night if any alternates are brought in or any replacements are brought into the NCAA tournament. But Niko Medved said yesterday during his presser that that's very unlikely, and they have all eyes set on the NIT and their first opponent, Buffalo. And the Rams, they're going to have to show out because they didn't show out on Friday.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to fuel the fire for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to look at it in a sense that they don't really know who this Buffalo team is. This is only the second time in CSU's school's history that they have played against Buffalo. So, I mean, this team is young. They've just gone into a tournament where they do know the players. They've played against them in the regular season. Didn't go the way they wanted it to. So it's going to be different for them to have to go into a game where they really have no idea who they're playing against.
Well, I think that's kind of where Niko Medved is going to thrive here. This is all going to be about coaching when you're playing a team that you're not familiar with. It's all about scouting reports. It's all about game scheme. And I would like the Rams to go for, a big presence in the paint. Kind of when they did have bright spots against Utah State, it was David Roddy down low against the 7-footer, Demias Queta, and he was still scoring points and creating opportunities for everybody else around the perimeter to either get in or take shots on the outside. And Buffalo is still a decent team. They made it to their quarterfinals of their conference tournament, but CSU is obviously favored in this. Now let's take a look at the other. This is now only a 16-team tournament this year for the NIT, as opposed to 32. So the quadrants are only of 4 teams. And the other one is Steph Curry's alma mater, number 2 Davidson against number 3 NC State, which rounds out CSU's quadrant. But another quadrant that is really interesting is there's another Mountain West team in there, number 2 Boise State in the bottom left quadrant of this bracket.
Yeah, they're going up against SMU, and I mean, I don't see them having any trouble in this first round. Their record 18-8 in the end of the regular season, and SMU only 11-5. That you can tell that they didn't have as many games during the regular season, so that might affect them. I mean, COVID did break a lot of team seasons this year, so I mean, I think Boise shouldn't have too big of a trouble with this one.
I would expect Derek Alston Jr. to have a big game in that one, and then rounding out the rest of that quadrant, Memphis, Dayton, the Flyers. Usually almost a perennial NCAA tournament team. I mean, they only 23 games this season. Everybody's just got less games. That's kind of what went into a lot of the seeding and why a lot of teams dropped down into the NIT as opposed to the NCAA tournament. But that's really all we really need to talk about for the NIT. And now moving on to the NCAA tournament, the big story, what everybody was talking about yesterday, if you weren't a CSU Ram fan. Well, you were, but afterwards you probably weren't talking about it a whole lot. Obviously, number one, not the surprise, Gonzaga in the West Quadrant, taking on the first playing game, Norfolk State and Appalachian State.
This will be an easy game no matter what for Gonzaga. I mean, like you said, it was not a shock whatsoever. Even the players' reactions, CBS showed the screen of them when they were filming them, and you could just see that they were excited, but it was nothing of a concern for them. They started clapping a little bit, but obviously 26-0 in the regular season, you're going to have an easy time getting into this bracket.
And what's kind of interesting to me about this quadrant is their number 5 seed is Creighton. Despite getting rolled by Georgetown, a 30-point just destruction, Georgetown and George Ewing's just path of destruction through their conference tournament, is number 5 a little too high for Creighton after that?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. They did drop a little bit, but I mean, they should not be losing games like that towards the end of the season. And now they're 20-8 going up against UCSB, who's 22-4. So I mean, I think it should be a close game. I think that Creighton might jump back after that loss because they might feel that was an embarrassing game for them, and they want to prove that they're not that type of a team. So I think this could be a good game, but I do think it was a little bit of a high seed for Creighton.
Yeah. And next, the playing game that everybody thought CSU was going to make, it kind of after this playing game was picked, much of CSU Twitter exploded, losing some hope. Wichita State and Drake.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of hope in Ram fans that this was going to be the playing game that we got. And, I mean, this was just the first section of the bracket, too. So there was still some hope that you had. Obviously, it's a little bit of a gut wrench and a little bit of a dagger, but, I mean, it should be a good game no matter what.
And obviously, Drake, Coach Medved's former team, who he helped turn around, taking on a 16-5 Wichita State team. I've seen more people upset with the fact that Wichita State is in over CSU as opposed to Drake, because Drake, they're 25-4. They should be an NCAA team despite having a plus 200 strength of schedule, which is, I mean, you still have to win your games, and strength of schedule is kind of hindsight. But Wichita State was the biggest bubble shock for me over CSU.
Yeah, I mean, that record doesn't really show all that much. You look at the other records, they've definitely played more games throughout the season than Wichita State. But, I mean, that's gonna be the same for a lot of teams in this tournament, especially the end of this year, because of how COVID's affect everybody's season. So, I don't know. I think Drake should get this easily and move on to the first round of the bracket.
And now, the East Quadrant, the bottom left quadrant, which had the biggest 1-2 shock for us, at least. You saw that in our reaction video. Number 1, Michigan, but number 2, Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a big shock all around. We just kind of had the simple idea that it was going to be Alabama right away. And this was the last section of the bracket that was actually shown and selected for this tournament. So going into it, you at least thought that Alabama was going to get a 1 seed no matter where it was. And all of a sudden you get to the last bracket and you're like, okay, yeah, Alabama has to have that 1 seed. And then Michigan's name pops up, and it was a big shock to all of us.
I wasn't ready for that. And I think Alabama is going to take that to probably take that to the Final Four. And Michigan Alabama Elite Eight is kind of what the NCAA is dreaming of here. Maybe a reason why they put them in the same bracket. But a big one here, Colorado. CU versus Georgetown, the 5 and the 12. It would have been so sick if CSU had gotten that 12 seed and played CU, a little Rocky Mountain showdown in Indianapolis, but instead it went to the seed-stealing Georgetown.
Yeah, of course we needed Colorado to win their last game in their tournament before going into Selection Sunday. They didn't, unfortunately, which is no help to CSU fans. But, I mean, like you said, this would have been a great matchup, Colorado versus CSU. But this still should be a good matchup. I just see Colorado kind of taking it.
McKinley Wright and CU, especially
Yeah.
in that, when you watch that Oregon State
Yes.
CU Pac-12 championship, McKinley Wright was playing out of his mind, and they were upset that they're still a 5 seed, and they were upset that they did not win their conference tournament. To a team like Oregon State, which we will get to a little bit later, but also in this quadrant is another playing game where CSU definitely got a spot stolen by Michigan State. It would be Michigan State, UCLA. I think UCLA belongs there, but not Michigan State. 5-12, like the 9th best team in the Big Ten. It just feels like a bit of a Power 5 conference bias onto why a 15-12 Michigan State team is in the tournament at a 12th seed instead of the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, your record is barely over 500. I think it was just kind of a slap in the face for Colorado State. I mean, CSU has a much better record than this, and they've been playing a lot better than Michigan State has throughout this season. So, I mean, it was definitely a dagger to CSU.
Absolutely. It was pretty upsetting. You saw a good amount of dismay earlier from the two of us. And now, the South Quadrant. Number 1, Baylor against Hartford. Not much of a surprise, but their potential matchup next, for me, I think is going to be probably the game I will make sure to tune in for in this first round is North Carolina, Wisconsin. That's just a very intriguing 8-9 matchup for me.
Yeah, and I mean, 8-9 seeds are always good games. They're the closest throughout their bracket, and I mean, North Carolina has always been one of the top basketball schools in the nation. So, I mean, this should be a great game. Wisconsin, they're both really close in their records. North Carolina 18-10 and Wisconsin 17-12 on the season. So, I mean, this should be a good game. Hopefully both teams actually show up and play out and do what they do best. So, I mean, yeah, it should be a good game. Always in that 8-9 seed like that.
And also, some more, the first Mountain West representation that we'll be talking to during this Selection Sunday special. Utah State, Texas Tech at the 6-11, Utah State at the 11th seed. They got the at-large spot after beating CSU in the Mountain West semifinals and then playing a fairly tight game with San Diego State, kind of pulled away from them at the end of that championship game. But the Aggies do have what it takes to give Texas Tech a fight, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely, especially after losing in the finals to San Diego State in the Mountain West Conference tournament. I mean, Neemias Queta is wanting this. He is a big man under the basket, and he's proving himself constantly that he deserves to be there. So I think that this team is definitely going to come back and try and get it a lot better than they did in the Mountain West.
And especially after last year when they win the tournament off of Sam Merrill's The Shot is what Utah State fans call it, and it was the shot, one of the shots of the year from Sam Merrill. And they, the NCAA tournament was canceled last year. They're ready to go. They don't have Sam Merrill, but I'm sure they're ready to make Sam Merrill proud. And lastly, this is the last matchup in the South. I'll probably be watching the South more than any other quadrant. It's Virginia Tech, Florida. Virginia Tech was picked to finish 8th in the ACC this year, and they got themselves a 10 seed in the NCAA tournament. They're playing number 7, Florida, ACC, SEC. Always fun to watch those teams go at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about it. Virginia Tech wasn't expected to do as well as they did in their conference. So, I mean, for them to get a 10 seed is incredible after their performance in their conference tournament. And going up against Florida, I think this should be a really close game.
And now for the final quadrant that we will be talking about in the Midwest quadrant, number 1 seed Illinois. Watching them play Ohio State was very fun on Sunday.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any game that comes down to the last seconds of the game is always so exciting to play or to watch. And to see Illinois get that championship, I think it was kind of expected for them to go into this and to get that championship win, but they didn't show it as such a surprise. I mean, or as such a expected win, if you know what I mean. They went into it, they played like they deserved to be there, and when they won, they were so excited. I mean, who wouldn't be excited to win a tournament like that? But still, to go into this tournament knowing you're probably going to make it to the finals, not knowing if you're going to win the championship, and to see the excitement still flowing through them after they even won, it was just great to see. And comparing them to Gonzaga when they got announced as the number 1 seed, Illinois showed a lot more excitement in their announcement, so it was good to see.
Well, and Ohio State is the number 2 seed in the South Quadrant. If Ohio State wins that, do they flip 1 and 2?
I don't know. That'll be interesting.
You know, it's all hypotheticals.
It's
but
March Madness, so you never know what's going to happen anyway.
We're not talking hypotheticals. We're talking a set bracket. Let's move on. Later in that tournament, we've got San Diego State who got the 6th seed against number 11 Syracuse. And number 11 Syracuse is one of those teams, another bubble team that a lot of people think CSU should have made it over. Which I would have to agree. They played far less games. They did not really impress too much in their conference tournament. But San Diego State has a bit of a favorable matchup.
Yeah, I mean, they're coming off a high with their Mountain West win, and for some of these guys, their hopes for a Mountain West or an NCAA run got cut last year.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt Mitchell, he's obviously very excited to go to this tournament finally. I mean, it's his senior year. He's wanting to prove himself. I mean, he already has his Mountain West Player of the Year, and then proving himself in the Mountain West tournament, getting the MVP for that championship. So, I mean, yeah, this team is looking forward to actually being able to play in this NCAA tournament before COVID turned it down last year.
And I think that's what's going to fire up this San Diego State team. I mean, they've talked about it in all of their press conferences. Matt Mitchell has said this means everything to him. And Matt Mitchell, I think, Matt Mitchell is going to have a Matt Mitchell game. It's going to be coined the Matt Mitchell game at some point in this tournament. Maybe against Syracuse, maybe against the winner of West Virginia, Morehead State. But it's nice to have Mountain West representation, no matter how much it hurts for CSU not to be in it. The more Mountain West basketball that is in the NCAA tournament, the better, because that brings more basketball attention to probably one of, if not the best group of 5 basketball conferences in the nation. And that's also kind of the reason why CSU didn't make it in. They're not a Power 5. They're not a premier conference. But they are a premier team. They just didn't get the recognition that they deserved, in my opinion.
Yeah, and obviously they're hoping that, I mean, something happens, that they're the replacement team that comes in, but I don't really see that happening. I mean, tomorrow's the deadline for that, so, you never know, but obviously it sucks for CSU and CSU fans to not see them in this tournament.
But nonetheless, it is the best time of the year. It is March Madness, and, I mean, I'm going to make a bracket, you're going to make a bracket.
Absolutely.
CSU is playing in the NIT later on Friday. It's going to be a beautiful next couple of weeks, not just for college basketball, but also for Mountain West basketball fans, and especially CSU fans, to finally be able to see CSU play in a postseason tournament for the first time since 2015. And the Rams and Medved, they've earned it. A lot of people, including myself, think they earned an NCAA spot. You know, if you truly cover the team like we do, you know that this team belongs with the big dogs. But make sure to stay tuned with us on Twitter as CSU goes on their journey. CTV Sports will be covering that. We'll be talking college basketball all week for the rest of the month, and hopefully again someday, barring any other COVID stuff. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. My name is Ethan Bird.
And I'm Rachel Hallam.
See you later, Ems.